Welcome to the latest in the Huddle podcast. Our buddy Carl Dukes put him up on vacation. Baldy, don't put him up at all. Baldy is dealing with no surgery. I don't want to get Baldy in trouble with his doctors. I'll put him up. I'll put up my pathetic arms for both of us. I am Jason Canfora, and we will be, I guess, basically a post-schedule release podcast here. We're going to look at a few of the bigger teams in each conference, and maybe how the schedule might sway the balance of power a little bit. We'll look at the NFC, we'll look at the AFC, then we'll have a few thoughts on just the overall schedule. And then there's a couple of teams that I think maybe younger up and coming teams that maybe might benefit a little bit from the way the schedule sets up for them. Baldy, let's sort of start here with the NFC. San Francisco, the prohibitive sort of betting favorites, right? I mean, they're projected to have 11.5 wins. If you want to play their total, we saw Detroit and Green Bay make real strides last year. We saw the entire Eastern division, kind of take a step back collectively late in the year between the Eagles' regular season collapse and Dallas getting worked in the playoffs again. Anything stand out to you about those sort of teams, the teams we can kind of look at as, the chalky favorites, and just any takeaways from their schedules?
Well, I mean, they're an elite primetime team. I mean, they're well coached. They win. They got a young quarterback. They've got a championship level defense. They've been there. They're expected to be there. The division is competitive, obviously, what the Rams did last year. But, I mean, look, they're a primetime team. They play on Christmas Day. I'm not Christmas Day, but, they get primetime games. And so they've got 3 Monday night games this year. I mean, I'm sure Troy Aikman and Joe Buck are thrilled. Maybe not about the travel schedule sometimes, but, they're a team that is expected to win, like you said, but, somewhere 12, 13 games. They bounced back after losing 3 in a row last year, not winning a game in a month, including their bye week, and went off and ripped off 8 straight games in a row. But, look, I mean, we look at San Francisco, they're a team built around their stars. McCaffrey, Debo, Kittle, Trent Williams, Fred Warner. I mean, they're a team built on stars. And when their stars show up, they're a hard team to beat.
This part of it we knew, right? Like, we already knew who teams were playing and whether it was going to be home or road. And the thing that kind of stands out for me for the Niners is, as I look at this thing, I don't know how good the Jets are or aren't going to be, but it's Aaron Rodgers. They get him in his first game back, right? While he's just sort of testing that Achilles and everything else. They get him at home week 1. They get the Chiefs Super Bowl rematch. That's at home week 7. And the Lions, right? They get that rematch game at home, and they get it in week 17, where who knows? Like, I'm pretty big on the Rams. I think you're probably pretty big on the Rams. But, like, there's a chance at week 17 that the 49ers could have wrapped up the division, So even that game might not, be as big for them as maybe it is for the Lions. Like, so I do think that works in their favor, the home road balance of power.
Well, the one thing that's really interesting about their schedule, I don't have exactly the games that are marked here, Jason, but they play 4 teams this year. They're coming off their bye week. So it's sort of like, back in the day when Nick Saban was at Alabama, like, everybody would try to get their bye week before the Alabama game to get as much rest, as much health, as much game planning as you can get. They're going to get 4 teams. They got the bullseye on their back to begin with.
Yes.
Then they're going to get 4 teams coming off bye weeks that get to play them. So that's, they're going to get their best shots for sure. But that's the price you pay when you're a marquee team and you're playing the number 1 schedule and all that kind of stuff. I mean, look, Cowboys on a Sunday night, Seattle on a short week on a Thursday night, at Buffalo on a Monday night. I mean, look, you're in San Francisco and you got to go, on the road to Buffalo. You got to go on the road to Tampa. Some of those trips, it could take a lot out of you right there.
Yeah, and it's interesting from the Rams' perspective. This was a team that started really slow last year, right? And Stafford didn't look right. The offensive line didn't look very good the first 5 or 6 weeks. They had a fairly early bye, and then they took off from there. Now, I don't know if the slow starts could have been a quirk, right? It could have just been who they were last year. But like the way it sets up for them this year, Baldy, like they've got 3 road trips in the first 4 games. Like early on, they're catching the Lions, right? Then they're going out to Arizona. Then they're hosting the 49ers. They're at the Bears, who, should be improved and certainly were a good defensive team. Then they go back to LA and host the Packers. That's a series gauntlet there for the Rams early.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. If you look at the Rams last year, I mean, their poor start almost was directly related to Kyron Williams getting hurt. Once he got back, the lineup got healthy. I mean, that running game took off, and once that took off, Stafford took off, and and then they got hot. They had a good balance. McVay can flat out coach. The young kids, Byron Young and Kobe Turner, the young kids really came on. So, like, he's just a great coach. He's a great coach. And, the one thing about whenever the Rams play the 49ers at home, I mean, it's a 49ers home game. Like, they take over the whole stadium. And it's actually something you're looking at Harbaugh right now, with the Chargers. You're looking at Sean McVay. Like, both those teams, they got to fight that. Anytime, I don't care. I mean, almost every team that goes in there, the visiting team takes over that stadium. And the Chargers have been, I mean, that's something that Harbaugh's got to fight. We'll get to the Chargers schedule, but that's a battle. You come all the way out to LA and you get a home game, and all you see, because the NFL Network is right there, right, Jason? So I'm out there for a lot of games. I mean, the Raiders play week 1, against the Chargers. And I know we're jumping around, but like that will be all Raider fans in that building. It's a Raider town, LA. They're gonna buy up these tickets. It's something that they got to fight. Look, the Eagles play in Los Angeles this year, play the Rams. Like, it's all Eagle fans. I've been on those flights going out there to LA. They start leaving on Thursday, go out for that game. So, like, that's something that has been talked about. But until you see it, you're like, this is a home game? Something to really think about.
Let's go over to the Lions now and cross over there, since we're just talking about the Lions facing the Rams early. And I don't know if we need to talk a whole lot about the NFC South here, Baldy. I mean, that's kind of a wasteland, right? Like that one is what it is. I mean, all their schedules look pretty easy on paper because they're playing each other, right? And they're matched up against some other divisions that aren't murderer's row. But like the Lions, you and I are old enough to remember the Lions played on Thanksgiving, and that might be the only time you see them in anything close to a standalone window or prime time that whole season.
Yep.
They're doing it 6 times. Like, they're in 6 standalone windows this year. Obviously, it kicks off with the Rams, a really tough game. They're playing a bunch of division winners now. That's what happens when you play a first-place schedule after years of playing more like a last-place schedule. And I'm going to be really interested to see how they handle that super early bye, Baldy. They come out of that bye, play 13 straight games before the playoffs start. Like,
all those teams.
That's tough.
All those teams that have that early bye. I mean, that's the first thing I think when you look at a team schedule is, okay, where's the bye? And if it's week 5, like it is for Detroit and Philadelphia, you got 13 straight games. And so, look, it does help that, if they're going to have to go on the road back-to-back games to go to Dallas and to Minnesota, like, it's good that they're doing it coming out of a bye.
Yeah.
You think, so that kind of helps a little bit. But I don't think anybody wants a week 5 bye, but it goes all the way to week 14. There's a couple weeks where there is no bye. Thanksgiving week, like, for whatever scheduling quirk I saw, like week 8, there's no byes. Doesn't really make any sense to me, but you would think, like, why not just start week 6 with the bye and just eliminate that no bye week 8, whatever. I don't, who knows? Maybe that's just one of those permutation things where they had to do it then to get this whole thing accomplished.
I do wonder if that scheduling quirk with the Lions, again, being one of the first teams to get a week off, if that ends up swinging the balance of power a little bit in that division between them and Green Bay. Like, I have a hard time. I could see either team winning 11, 12 games, either team winning the division. I I think there's some similarities there in their rise. Green Bay, more traditional by like week 10. Green Bay had some trouble putting teams away at Lambeau. I can think of the Bucks going in there, in the second half of the season and having some joy. Sure, they want to restore Lambeau to being sort of as impervious as it once was. Any thoughts on that division in general, and whether that whether that 13 straight weeks of football could catch up to the Lions in the end with Green Bay maybe passing on by?
Well, a couple things on Green Bay. First of all, for them to go to San Paulo and play the Eagles, that's a big deal.
Weird.
It's weird, but look, they're playing in San Paulo. You get at least 9 days to get ready for your home opener against Indianapolis. So you get a little bit more time to prepare. But traveling is not going to be easy. It never is. But there is a weird thing in their schedule from a national standpoint. Starting on Thanksgiving, where they play Miami at home, all right? Then the following Thursday, they play Detroit at home or at Detroit. Then they go to Seattle, which is a Sunday night game. Then they play New Orleans, which is a Monday night game. They literally play 4 primetime national games in 4 straight weeks in a row. Like, I don't know that. And before that Thanksgiving Day game, they get the 49ers at home. Like, that's a tough. In fact, the whole thing after the bye, at Chicago, San Francisco home, and then 4 straight national games where, look, the national games are fun for us, but it's a pain in the ass for coaches. Like, the whole schedule thing changes, and when do you get your rest? When do you catch up? When do you meet? When do you practice? Like, it throws a kink, into your practice habits. You just can't ever really get comfortable for literally 5 straight weeks in a row.
Well, and that's the youngest team in football, right? So they, like last year, they weren't thought of as highly. They didn't have the same expectations. We didn't know what Jordan Love was. They weren't being thrust into these windows. They played a pretty traditional schedule. In fact, I think there was a period of time where they were probably playing as many 1 p.m. kickoffs as anybody. So I do wonder a team that is that inexperienced. Now, the head coach, right, he's coaching the playoffs, like, not a big deal for him. LaFleur will come up with an interesting practice plan and all that. But and we're going to get to the AFC on the other side of the break. Like, Houston's dealing with the same thing. Like, it is weird when you've got basically a 5 to 6 week chunk of your schedule, which is completely not normal at all from a training, rehab, practicing, diet standpoint.
Yeah.
Nothing's normal. Nothing's normal in the facility. It's not your normal weeks.
Yeah. And it's not easy on the fans, playing all these late games and Monday night, Sunday night games and Thursday night games. I mean, it's not easy on the fans either. So, holiday season, it's a challenge, but I mean, they believe, like, we'll get to this, after the break and everything, Jason, but just from a scheduling standpoint, I was listening to Mike North and, who's a big part of, putting this whole thing together. But, like, the quarterbacks drive this whole thing right now. Yeah. Now, the ratings were still high, even though we played 60-something quarterbacks last year. But you really don't want to play a Black Friday game like the Jets in Miami did last year, and you're seeing whatever quarterback the Jets marched out there. Like, it's just going to be hard. So we know these guys are going to go down. They always do. It's just a question of when. Do they have a capable backup? Jordan Love lined up for 19 games last year. He was fantastic. Do the backup quarterbacks get tested this year like they did last year? And then, because this whole scheduling thing kind of falls away when you get to like Minnesota did last year once Kirk Cousins went down.
Baldy, in the NFC East, there's a truism, right? The team that won the division the year before doesn't win it the following year. That's been going on forever. If that holds, I don't think I'd have to be a rocket scientist to say, well, I think maybe the Eagles could finish a little stronger this year, and maybe they pass the Cowboys by. Dallas's opening stretch to me might go a long way to sort of defining who they are and like their greatest front runners, right? And last year they played a bunch of cupcakes early. They're up by 21 points. Mike is going off. They can't run the ball. Who cares, right? It doesn't matter. Nobody can defend CD Lamb. Like, it was a snowball, positive snowball that worked in their favor. Then they had a jump up in weight class and they got punched in the face. Like them playing these AFC North teams early is going to be really interesting to me. Like super physical teams, a very different style than what they were facing at this time a year ago, right? When they built that early lead. Like Cleveland's defense was terrible on the road last year. They were historically good at home, right? Like going to Cleveland week 1, probably not a lot of fun. Like then you've got the Ravens 2 weeks later. Like then you're going to Pittsburgh 2 weeks after that, right? Then you're playing the Lions, who, I mean, good luck. It's a bye, and you come out of the bye and you go to San Francisco. Like, I don't think, Baldy, we're going to be talking about the 7-1 or 8-2 Dallas Cowboys.
Well, I mean, the Cowboys have won 12 games 3 years in a row. They won the division 2 out of 3 years. They were the number one offense from a just pure stat standpoint last year. But put up 40 on the Jets, put up 50 on Washington, put up 40 on the Giants. I mean, they ran the system of the poors out of the gym. But when, like you mentioned, they jump up in weight class, they struggle. Is this the year that Dallas falls apart? Like, I mean, I think everybody's asking that question. You go to Cleveland. Oh, yeah. Tom Brady's going to Cleveland. Kevin Burkhardt's going to Cleveland. Fox is sending their number one team to Cleveland week 1. There's Myles Garrett sitting there, probably won't play a snap in preseason. Yep. Just going to be chomping at the bit at whatever left tackle the Cowboys put out there. I don't know if it's going to be Tyler Smith, Tyler Guyton. I don't know. They're going to have either a young or new center. So Myles Garrett's he's equal opportunity, right? He's going to line up and down the line. Like, this guy can ruin your game. So it's a tough start going to Cleveland. It's a travel. It's the dog pound. It's Jim Schwartz knows this team from being in Philly forever. I mean, it's a tough opening for Dallas. And so, you go and, I don't know, like that, you got the Giants in there, you got the Saints in there, like they can win those games. But, we're all waiting to see like what this roster is going to look like and if they're good enough to really compete against the better teams, because they couldn't beat a winning team or a team with a winning record for a long time last year.
Well, and it's interesting to contrast that with the Eagles, right? That game against the Packers is a little bit of a freak show, right? Like, are the Packers a better team than the Eagles? Yeah. Could they beat the Eagles 4 out of 7 on most neutral sites? Yeah, this is not a normal neutral site. It's Brazil to start a season. So who knows? Like, that might work in the Eagles' favor. Then they get the run of basically another preseason. You get Atlanta. You're at the Saints, which that dome, I mean, it can be tough, but come on, that's a game you got to win. Like, you're at the Bucks, like, all right, like, might be a little hot. Like, they were good last year. Are they going to be that good again? Like, they get the Browns at home, right? Then they get the Giants, and they've got the early bye in there as well. Like, if Philadelphia's leading Dallas by 3 games by week 7 or 8, I don't care what the rest of the schedule is. I'm not sure Dallas is closing that margin.
Well, Philadelphia is such a conundrum right now. I mean, people have been hitting me up like, what's Nick Sirianni got to do? He's got to get tougher with the players. I'm like, yeah, he can, except that they started 8-0 and 10-1 in each of the last 2 years.
Right.
Like, whatever they're doing in preseason, which isn't much, it's working. Now, you can argue, last year, like the collapse, like nobody could get them out of a funk, including a horrendous loss to Tampa. And so they've, to Howie's credit, he rebuilt his roster. He's got star players in there, Saquon, Devin White. Was there anybody in offense they didn't give an extension to, Jason?
Everybody got paid, Baldy.
Like everybody got a big fat, payday. So, I mean, really, to me, they got the coordinators. They didn't think they were going to lose Vic Fangio last year. They got him back in the building. Vic's already come out and said, Jason, like he's from Northeast Pennsylvania. He wants this to be his last stop. His grandkids are there. His kids are there. Like this, he wants to make this work. Kellen Moore is an upgrade on every level over what they had. I mean, they should be a very good team. I mean, the roster is an elite roster. Saquon should have the best year that he's ever had. So, I mean, I can't find a scenario where the Eagles aren't going to be good, aren't going to be competitive right now.
Well, that's our way too early look at the NFC. We'll be back on the other side of the break to break down some of the key teams in the AFC. All right, Baldy, we teased it. It's time to pay it off. The AFC schedules are obviously out as well. Might as well start in the AFC North. There are no free rides in the AFC North. I mean, if you look at like divisions, who faces the most playoff teams, who faces the most 10-win teams from last year, who has the toughest strengths of schedule if you base it off last year's record, it's coming up all AFC North teams. You talked about all the gauntlet of weird start times and primetime games and what that might mean for a team like the Packers. The Ravens do the same thing. The Ravens have a 7-week stretch where I think they play once on a normal Sunday. There's a bye in there as well. Ravens have a really late bye. The Steelers don't play a divisional game until like mid-November, and then it's backloaded with all those tough division games. Like the Browns are pretty much on the road a lot late in the year. I don't know, man. Like I don't know how to make heads or tails of it. Like it looks like a gauntlet for all 4 teams.
I mean, it's a tough year for the AFC North. First of all, they're returning 3 playoff teams. I don't think, Pittsburgh Steelers last year were 5-1 in the division. The only loss was to Cleveland by a field goal when they didn't know what offense meant, and they had to change coordinators. Got back in. No, but I don't think anybody doesn't believe that Pittsburgh's going to be improved in a lot of different areas. But I mean, look, Cleveland's got. Just based off strength of schedule, Cleveland, Baltimore, Cincinnati, they've got the 3 toughest schedules right at the top in that division. And you got 6 tough division games.
Yeah.
And then you get these stretches where Baltimore, they got to play the Bills, they got to play the Cowboys, they got to play, the Eagles. So, first place schedule in the toughest division in football, like it's going to be a challenge. And, but that's all right. That Baltimore is like Harbaugh will figure all that stuff out. He's got to match up with his brother and the Chargers. And so, I mean, look, you get the league MVP. You're going to, you got to get in prime time. You get Joe Burrow back. If he plays 17 games, he gives you a chance every week. So, this is a division that is, the quarterbacks have to carry their teams a great deal. And when those guys are out there every Sunday, they give their team a chance to win every Sunday.
The Steelers, just want to read here. Let's go. Let's pick it up at week 8, Baldy. They've got a week 9 bye. They're at the Commanders. Steelers host the Ravens on a Sunday. They go to Cleveland. That's tough when you're playing back-to-back division games like that, physical games.
Oh, short week too. That's a Thursday night football
to Cleveland on a Thursday. That's tough. Come back and host the Bengals, host the Browns, go to Philadelphia, go to Baltimore on a Saturday, short week, come home, host the Chiefs week 17, and then play the host the Bengals week 18.
Yeah.
I don't know how you could construct a more challenging gauntlet than that.
That's the definition of a gauntlet right there. That's a gauntlet. There is, here on May 16th, that's a tough stretch. There's a lot of, there's 2 games in that stretch where you're on 4 days rest. 2 in the second half of a season after your bye. It's not like there's a bye in there where you can kind of, but there's 2 short weeks in there. And even if you look at on the road at Philly, on the road against Baltimore, that Baltimore game's on Saturday. So that's a short week and you're on the road. And then you get 4 days rest to get Kansas City, and so that there was a stretch where you're on the road 4 to 5 weeks, short weeks like that. Mike Tomlin will get challenged. It'll be interesting if he was on our podcast live with us right now, what he truly thinks about this schedule. And that's a brutal stretch.
Now, during that same stretch, you've got the Ravens playing 3 times in 10 games, right? So it's not like the last year's division winners have it really easy. There's a stretch for the Ravens where they're going Sunday, Monday, Sunday, Saturday, Wednesday, Sunday.
Just hard to get into
a pattern. All over the place.
Hard to get into a pattern. And what happens is if you got a guy banged up on a Saturday, and you're in a stretch run for a playoff run, Christmas, right? Do you even chance playing them on that Wednesday in a short week, or you just say,
right,
like, let's put them in mouthballs. We need you in January. Like, don't even and if it's a marquee player, I don't want to say anybody's name, but if it's a marquee player, like those decisions are hard decisions, but decisions you have to make.
Last year, the Houston Texans were the darlings of the NFL, right? Probably them in the AFC and the Packers in the NFC. And obviously, CJ Stroud took the league by storm. Very different set of circumstances for them this year in terms of their schedule. Like, I don't mind it at all early, and they're really going to have to get off to a hot start, I think, because things, eventually catch up to them. But them now becoming a team that has to play in prime time all the time. Them facing a stretch, like look at week 8, they host the Colts, then they're at the Jets on a Thursday, then they host the Lions on a Sunday, then they're at Dallas on a Monday. They do get a few Sundays after that before their bye. But I do wonder, like, especially with them I love everything they did last year. But we know that this league isn't really linear, right? It's very rare that you win 2 more games than the previous year and then 2 more and then 2 more, right? Chile did it. Like Brad Childress did it once in Minnesota for like 4 straight years. Doesn't happen very often. I do wonder if in that division, the schedule that Houston has to play, the division winners that they have to face, the Chiefs and the Ravens, if that's enough to make, to keep a couple other teams there in it, this idea that Houston's going to run away with it, right? Because they've had a great offseason. I wonder if the schedule's a mitigating factor in keeping it more competitive.
Well, yeah, I mean, just look what they did week 1, Jason. They put Houston in Indianapolis. I mean, when Anthony Richardson was healthy early in the year, they went to Houston and spanked them hard. So you're going to get Anthony Richardson and CJ Stroud week 1 in Indianapolis. I mean, I think Anthony Richardson showed everybody he could play in this league. And Shane Steichen's a good coach. He knows how. So, I mean, you got 2 young coaches, 2 programs. I mean, somehow Indianapolis, with the backup quarterback, still won a whole lot of games last year. And we feel like, they're a team that's built, for the post. I mean, this is competitive right out of the block, for Houston. And so, like, they could go to Houston and stumble. Go to Indy and stumble. They got to go to Minnesota. Like, who knows where they stumble, why they stumble. Just last year has nothing to do with what's going to happen this year. Everybody's chemistry is different. A lot of new players there. How does Diggs fit in? Like, I think they're definitely on the up and coming. The quarterback looks real. But, we've seen these things go. If you get off to a slow start this year, there's that buzz that they finished with a year ago, spanking Cleveland in the playoffs and giving Baltimore a run for a half and all that. Like, does that just go away? So I think it's quite interesting to kind of follow this team here, because I think the league feels like they're here and have arrived, but the division's gotten a lot better. And the schedule, I mean, I see Dallas and Detroit and, Miami and Kansas City and Baltimore. I see a lot of tough teams on that schedule.
Yeah. In terms of the AFC West, right, it's Kansas City and everybody else. I don't know that we need to belabor the point. Like, if you're a Broncos fan or you're a Raiders fan, there was no way they were going to spit out a schedule that was going to look that good to you just because you're staring up at everybody. But boy, oh boy, I just think it's going to be pretty long for Denver and for the Raiders. And yes, the Chiefs are playing a first place schedule like that. That's how it works. But when you factor in, Baldy, that, like, I don't know if this is the same caliber Bills roster that they just faced in the playoffs. Like, you factor in that they get the Ravens at home, first game, while Taylor Swift's going to be singing the national anthem, right? They're going to be hanging another banner. Like, I know the Lions beat them in the kickoff game last year, but, like, I'm sure if you're telling Andy Reid you can pick when you're going to have the Ravens, I'll take them then.
Yeah.
They play the NFC, the NFC South, Baldy. You know what I mean? Like, They play. I mean, like that's a rebuilding division, and everybody in their division except for them is rebuilding. Like, I still think the Chiefs are winning 12 or 13 games. Like, Chiefs over 11 and a half wins. I'm there.
Yeah, I mean, look, the receivers couldn't catch a ball for a stretch last year. They didn't look like a very good team, the way they lost some games. They looked awfully bored at times last year to me. But and they may look like that again this year. They may look bored at times. Everybody's gotten paid. Everybody that wanted their bag got their bag. But they know what they have to do once they get to January. I mean, that team just knows. And I'm not saying they're going to flip a switch. They might play great football all year. Xavier Worthy might become a star. But no matter what happens, and if they go through a stretch where Mahomes turns the ball over or whatever happens, that's just a team you can't worry about. I mean, Denver got them to turn it over 5 times last year. They finally beat the Chiefs. It didn't make any difference. Yeah, Denver beat the Chiefs for the first time since Mahomes took over. Didn't make any difference. The team that I think we want to watch what Antonio Pierce does as a full-time coach. We don't believe the quarterback play is going to be good enough. The offensive line is good enough to truly compete. But I think we all want to watch what Harbaugh does with the Chargers. I think we all – because, I mean, you can look at his track record and you go, well, he's going to win. Well, he took over a 3-13 San Francisco team, had him 11-5 in the playoffs the next year. Like, he did an immediate turnaround. You got to believe that the turnaround is going to happen.
Absolutely.
It's going to happen. Now, what that means is that 9 wins, 10 wins. I mean, I don't know, but I think Justin Herbert's going to get the best offensive line. I think they're going to be very committed to running the football. I think their tackling will look crisp for the first time ever. I just think certain things are going to change right now. And so that's the team that I can't wait to watch. You can look at the schedule and go, does it really matter? Like, I don't know. They're going to be it's going to be a Raider home game, against them week 1 at SoFi. They got to deal with all that stuff. But, I just feel like this team is going to be so improved.
Yeah.
And it's going to be good for the whole division.
He gets his brother in the middle of the year. And I think if they find a way to win that game, that could be the real culture changer. Like, that could be the one where, hey, we've all, like, if there was anybody who didn't have the buy-in before, right, we just won a bully bowl against the Ravens. Look out. We could do that to anybody. Like, I think the timing of that could be good for them. We'll finish up this segment on the AFC East. Few little things that kind of stood out to me, Baldy. Obviously, we knew the Jets were going to get thrown in primetime like crazy after Aaron Rodgers only, participated in 4 of those primetime snaps last year. That happened. I don't feel like it's the gauntlet coming out this year that it was last year. Like, last year, I looked at the Jets' first 6 weeks on paper and said, I don't care who the quarterback is. They're in a little bit of trouble. Like, I feel like it's not as difficult this year, which obviously could help them get off to a better start, which I think they absolutely need. And then with Miami, I always try to see how many times in the first 6-8 weeks of the season are they getting somebody at home in a 1 o'clock or 4 o'clock window where that midday sun is beating down on you, right? And that's a real advantage for them. The problem with them getting good is that doesn't happen as much anymore because more of these games are kicked out to an evening window where obviously that heat and humidity is not quite the same. So, I think that's a factor that might work against them a little bit here, especially as fast as they like to play. They don't get that home cooking. And by cooking, I mean the sun beating down on you as much.
Well, a couple things going back to the Jets. It's pretty interesting. They play 3 games in 11 days to start. Okay. San Francisco's going to be tough. They come home to Tennessee in a short week. They play the Patriots. So it'll be interesting because Robert Saleh is going to have some work to do here and how he's going to put this team together. Meaning there's going to be a fine line between getting them a lot of work to get this new offensive line humming and Aaron Rodgers comfortable, but yet they still got to play 3 games in 11 days. That's going to be tough. But it is interesting, the schedule makers and what they did, because in the last 7 games, they're all standalone games, no national games, basically 1 o'clock games, like almost anticipating the Jets will get injured the way they always do. And so they're going to be irrelevant. That's kind of what the schedule says to me. They play a bunch of national games in the first 11 weeks. They're all over the place, everywhere. And then they just they kind of just go away to a normal. That might be a good thing. Might be a good thing where you just get a real set schedule and all that kind of stuff. I do think Miami is interesting because I think their offense is going to be very good. And I think the defense with Anthony Weaver, it's going to take a while. These guys coming back from injuries, young players, a lot of new faces. Like, I do think it's going to take time for that defense to catch up. And so, but the offense puts eyeballs in the seats, puts eyeballs in front of the TV screen. If they're putting up a 70 spot, those kind of things get your attention in this business.
Well, that was our look at the AFC. Stick with us. We have a few more takeaways here on the In the Huddle schedule special. I guess it's special. We'll call it a special. All right, Baldy, before we get out of here, a few takeaways for each of us. I think we both looked at this schedule, and it was hard not to feel like anything's in play, right? Like, if 2 years from now there's a week where there's NFL games on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then the following Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, like if there was a stretch where they played on like 10, 11 straight days, I would bet the over on that. Like, I would say, maybe it's not 2 years from now, maybe it's 4 years from now, but it certainly looks like anything's in play.
Well, I mean, last year the ratings benefited from the strike in Los Angeles, and there was very little other programming out there. But we can look at, there was a point probably, Jason, I'm saying maybe 6 to 8 years ago, where we all questioned whether or when we were going to hit the saturation point. And it was going to be this backlash to how much football is too much football. Well, we realized that it doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist. And we're finding they're taking more and more money from more and more outlets right now. And the coffers just keep getting filled. And all of the attention, whether it's at the draft or it's at the combine or it's preseason game, whatever it is, it's drawing a huge audience. And I would imagine that at the end of this season, Jason, 48 of the 50 biggest audience television shows in America are going to be NFL football. So that's the world we're living in. And that's why we could play on Wednesday without much fear, even though 13 teams now are going to play at least 2 games on 4 days of rest.
Yeah.
2 years ago, that was unheard of. It was every team got 1 week where they had 4 days of rest. And they would schedule around that, where you'd have a bye week after it, a bye week going into it, to just alleviate some of that just buildup of, guys just getting knocked down, not getting back up. And so now we're at the point where they don't even think about that anymore. Yeah. It's not even a concern. It doesn't seem to be.
Well, here's what they're doing, Baldy. They're playing chess. So they're setting all that up, right, for us to look at this and say, well, there's 4 and all these teams playing 3 and 10. What? Wow, that doesn't seem tenable to do that year after year after year. And that's when they say, oh, well, we got a solution. We go to 18 and put in a second bye. Then you won't have that anymore. Like, I mean, it's like, hey, come on. If you open your eyes, you see what they're doing. Hey, NFLPA, you don't like those stretches of 3 and 10? If we throw a second bye in, we promise you we'll eliminate those. Like, okay. Like, it's, they're going to opt out of their TV deals in a couple of years, which I told you back in 2021 was going to happen. Because they put those outs in specifically. Well, if there's more inventory, we would have to renegotiate those contracts. So, like, that's been baked into this cake since they did those TV deals years ago. A couple other quick takeaways from me, Baldy. We touched on one in the AFC segment a little bit. I feel like the Colts, if they get off to a hot start, could be an interesting team. They're going to throw a very different look at people than what you saw with Gardner Minshew last year. And there just wasn't a whole lot of that Richardson stuff on film, but like what it was pretty electric. And if let's just say they catch Houston a little bit sleeping, right? A little bit thinking about the banners that they're hanging week 1. Like, I like the way this schedule sets up for the Colts. And on the NFC, we talked about some of these teams not playing division games till the end, like Pittsburgh. That's Chicago in the NFC, but I think it could really help Chicago in a way that it might hurt Pittsburgh because they can get some of their kinks out. The early stretch doesn't look that tough. That division's a lot better, but we talked about who the Lions have to go through and who the Packers have to go through. By the time the Bears are playing those teams, they're going to be pretty banged up. They're going to be licking their wounds a little bit, right? Some of them have late buys, so they're going to have to manage a lot of stuff. I feel like Chicago not having to test itself against the teams that know them best until late November could go a long way to helping that offense and Caleb Williams.
But even last year, they beat Detroit. They should have beaten them twice. They had them, way up and won the first game with Detroit. We know that Green Bay and Chicago is one of the great rivalries in this league. So that thing is wide open. We really don't know what Minnesota is going to be because we really don't know if it's, is J.J. McCarthy stepping in? Is it Sam Darnold? Is it some combination? How good can the offense be? So we don't really know right now. But I'm not ruling Minnesota out. If one of these quarterbacks ends up getting hot, I think Kevin Connell can coach pretty good. I think Brian Flores is excellent on the other side. I mean, they've got stability there. So, it should be a great division. And just because Detroit delivered last year, and they did deliver, Dan Campbell's telling his team every day, doesn't matter what we did last year. Doesn't matter that we should have beaten San Francisco. None of that matters. That we went to Kansas City and won. You got to tell your team we're starting from square one, and we got to be the Detroit Lions all over again. And so I feel like he's turned that building around, that culture around. But you still got to do it year in, year out the way Kansas City, Baltimore, some of these teams, Philadelphia, can kind of reinvent themselves every year and get back to the playoffs right now.
Anything else that caught your attention, Baldy? Anything else to get off your chest?
I just think it's interesting. There was some word that some of the delay in the scheduling towards last night, May 15th, was because of how they're going to handle Christmas. And so, these four teams that are playing on Christmas, Kansas City, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Houston, they had to figure out that they had to play the Saturday before that. And so now you're playing Saturday, Wednesday. Nobody's ever played Saturday, Wednesday. But it made a new partner very, very happy. That's one. Netflix paid a lot of money, $75 million a game. The NFL made $150 million in one afternoon, Jason. If they could have figured out that Netflix would take a third game, they would have put a third game on there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's that. And then, this thing is about this schedule is about quarterback matchups, the way we saw Brady and Manning play every year for a long, long time and building up to those games. And, and I think, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes has that. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen has that. We look forward, Lamar Jackson, against, CJ Stroud. These matchups feature the quarterbacks. And that's never going to get old. That's why 6 went in the first 12 picks this year. You got to get it right. You got to get that guy you're building. You got to, figure out how to. And if you don't, and you make a mistake, you're back at square one and you're playing 1:00 games.
Yeah, which for some of these teams is probably for the best. Well, look, we're going to have a lot more time this offseason to continue to look at the schedule, among other things. OTAs about to kick off around the league. There'll certainly be some more signings here down the stretch as teams get a look at their rookies in some of these OTAs and see what holes they filled and what holes maybe they haven't filled. A lot of safety still out there. So we will continue to kick it with you guys here every week on the In the Huddle podcast. Please check us out on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. We're everywhere these days, Baldy. You can check Baldy out on Baldy's Breakdowns and NFL Network. You can find me in a bunch of different places as well. And we will talk to you guys next week.